Hello, BookTube. Well, a little while ago, as I'm sure a lot of you know, Mercedes at Mercy's Bookish Musings did a video with the explosive title, Am I Falling Out of Love with Reading? The kind of question that dedicated readers don't even like to read, much less think, in which she wonders if she's just having a really bad reading year or if something has changed, if there's been a sea change of some kind in her relationship with reading. Uh, and it sparked a rash of reactions, a tidal wave of videos, which I love. I love watching that. I must confess, when a community as super smart and tail chasing as BookTube decides to turn its gaze inward, usually it's a feast of content that follows that teaches me a lot, not only about a lot of my favorite booktubers, but also about why I do this. It sharpens my own ideas about why I do this. Uh, and I made a response myself, and so did a whole bunch of other people. And just recently, the uncrowned queen of BookTube, Ariel Bassett, made a great video, sort of capping the whole subject. Really, her video sort of put the whole subject to bed and left no room, no necessity really, for a response video. So I'm making a response video in which she asks whether or not we have inadvertently transformed reading into a competitive sport. And the way that would have happened is, it's a fascinating discussion in her video. I won't do it justice in here because I won't talk long enough. But I could talk for 2 hours on the subject. In her video, she raises the specter, the possibility that perhaps we have inadvertently turned reading into a competitive sport by making it public. That all of a sudden we are public readers. We used to, before BookTube, simply read. It was an intensely private thing, the most private thing. You communing with the thoughts of someone else who might be dead, and certainly never going to meet you. And that was it. When you were done, you moved on to your next book. And now we have Bookstagram, we have Twitter, we have Goodreads, and we have BookTube. Now all of a sudden, our friends and the people who are interested in our opinions, who log on to all of those things and follow us on all of those platforms, know a lot about what used to be a completely private thing. They know when we start a book. They know how much we read per day. They know what we thought about it when we're done. And that makes it a public spectacle. That makes us all, to one degree or another, public readers. And when you're doing that, of course, you start to compare and contrast how you're doing thing X with how everybody else is doing thing X. And that can introduce the specter of competitiveness. And a whole bunch of other specters too. One of the things that Ariel Bassett brought up in her video that I thought was most fascinating was the specter, one of the specters that haunts her reading, which is the fear of not being relevant. That you're watching BookTube, or, for instance, in my case, you're reading all of the book reviews in the Western world, and you see the same book cropping up in a bunch of different places, and all of a sudden, even though it makes no sense at all, you start to feel compelled to read that book. You start to think, I'm doing something wrong. I'm slacking if I don't read that book. I say that it makes no sense at all. I mean, it makes no sense at all in the context of BookTube. It actually does make sense in my profession. Obviously. I'm not a household name. I'm not an A-list critic. I take whatever work I can find, and I'm lucky enough to have a handful of regular venues. But I'm not one of these people that you'll see in the TLS or the London Review of Books who any editor in their right mind would pay to write about anything. You decide what you want to write about, or the New Yorker. You decide what you want to write about, and we'll run you. I'm not one of those critics. So I actually need to be, in a way, relevant. I don't have to chase the ball. No editor has ever come to me and said, well, 6 different journals have run a review on this particular book, so now I want you to. Instead, I get to sort of say, well, here in the venues in the venues where I write and on the subjects that I like to write about, here are the 6 books that people are going to be talking about, and I'd like to talk about them too. I don't ever, of course, suggest a 10-year-old novel, unless it's got a new reprint that I think people are going to be talking about. Otherwise, I sort of have to stay relevant. As you'll know, if you've read this if you've watched this channel for any length of time, that doesn't explain my reading. My reading is vastly larger than that, and it's entirely born out of enthusiasm. It just so happens on this one particular channel, it just so happens that all of my enthusiasms, almost, are now channeled into new books, some of which people are talking about. So in that sense, I may be in the minority on BookTube and not really needing to justify my paying attention to relevance. But that having been said, leaving myself out of the equation for a minute, because let's be honest, I'm out of this equation in a lot of ways, right? I mean, in November of 2017, I read 122 books. That's considerably more than even the most active booktubers are likely to read in the whole year. And I read that in 1 month. I do nothing else. I go nowhere else. I'm not wearing any pants. So not only do I get an excuse when it comes to relevance, it's not actually a neuroses on my part. I want to read the newest books. I want to be part of those conversations, but that's my profession. Not only do I get an excuse on that, but I'd like to think I get an excuse on the competitiveness part too, because I'm not. Ariel Bissett raises a wonderful point that if you have school or life or other hobbies or a million things going on, and you get 6 books read in a month, and then you watch somebody's wrap-up for that month, and they say, yeah, it wasn't a very good month for me, I only read 7 books, we have reached a point where, totally irrationally, you can hear them say that and feel bad about yourself. And that's awful. And she's right. A lot of it goes around. I have talked to booktubers who feel that way. And the solution that she proposes for all of this is to simply opt out of the cycle. Just decide that it doesn't matter. And I want to wholeheartedly second that as a solution. Of course, it is the only solution, right? I mean, I read all the new books that I can because they genuinely fascinate me. It genuinely fascinates me to do that. There have been times in my life when it didn't. There have been times in my life when what I wanted most was to go to the Boston Public Library and prowl the stacks for some book on some subject somewhere, maybe 100 years old, that I had never heard of, that I could then read, that I could just consume. And I did the same thing at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, a used bookstore that I love to go to, or that I did before I had a puppy. That has bargain carts outside, $1, $3, and $5, and you never know what's going to be out there. A lot of other bookstores, they have a bargain cart outside. It'll be old Tom Clancy, it'll be old Danielle Steele, but at the Brattle, you never know what you're going to find. Treasures on every cart. There were long stretches of time where I would go there and just consume what was there. I didn't care that it was old. I didn't care that it was out of print. Now, I do. Legitimately, I do. I'm not actually driven by this. I actually well, as you know, if you've watched this channel, I am not a good enough actor to fake the kind of squealing enthusiasm I feel for a huge percentage of the new books that I show on this channel. I couldn't fake that. It's genuine. But it's only relevant by accident. It just so happens, that I have adapted to the books that are flowing here on a daily basis. So, again, I am a kind of an exception. The rest of you, I don't know how to put this delicately, there isn't a single booktuber that I watch for relevance. There are very few booktubers that I watch even for irrelevance, even for what they read, regardless of whether or not it's new. Ariel Bissett is a perfect example. She's been making booktube videos since the late 1950s. I have watched every one and loved them all. And in that entire time, all those videos that she has made, she has, to the best of my recollection, not once ever enthused about a book that I wanted to read. Or enthused about a book that I had also read and in any way liked. Not once. Not in all that time. If relevance were important, I would have stopped watching her after that happened 10 times. What about Emma Books? Oh my God. She's one of my favorite booktube channels. And I wouldn't read anything that she holds up on camera if you put a loaded rifle in my face. Sam at Thoughts on Tomes, the same way. Most of the books that she holds up and enthuses about, I either didn't like or wouldn't read under any circumstances. And I wouldn't miss her channel for all the tea in China. The whole point here being that on BookTube, as in life, the relevant thing, the important thing, is you. Not what you're reading. What you're reading doesn't make you interesting. You make what you're reading interesting. So if I watch Thoughts on Tomes, I'm fascinated from start to finish because of her, not because of what she's saying. My interest level doesn't go up because somebody's suddenly talking about Erasmus. It doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way for me, and it shouldn't work that way for anybody. And surely, if we can all acknowledge that cycle is bad, and of course it is, mindless competition is bad. Comparing and contrasting, keeping up with the Joneses is bad. It's corrosive. If we can all agree that that's bad, then surely we can, if we turn the gaze just a little, we can see that we have the ultimate tool to defeat it right here. And that's BookTube. That's this community where we are watching and supporting each other. I say it guardedly. I'm perfectly aware of my own introduction to BookTube. It wasn't exactly a crystal clear demonstration of love and support. But since then, almost 2 years since then, I have had it in spades. I've had love and support in spades, in good times and in bad, even when all of you were having the rotten taste to disagree with me about something. So I know that it's true. We have created here on BookTube a community that is the perfect antidote to the corrosive infection of relevance and competition. Yes, we are all public readers. We are all talking to each other about what we read. But the way to do it is the way that we're already doing, thanks in large part to a lot of the booktubers that I've mentioned. The way we're doing it is the right way, where we can have knockdown, drag-out, flame-throwing fights about whether or not such and such an author is good or bad, and be friends right through the whole process. I know for a fact that at least, I think I'm up to 102 of you, were not happy at all with the little takedown I did of a certain horror author a few videos ago. And not one of you unsubscribed. There's been no hate comments. You just completely disagree with me. You saw an example of it just the other day on this channel when I had Zach here in this room. And we both mentioned the exact same book, Dalek's new biography of FDR, which left him profoundly unsatisfied and which left me profoundly satisfied. Same book. Two extremely critical readers, same book, completely different reactions, didn't affect a thing. When that video was over, we went on to have a wonderful time. And we do that all the time on BookTube as well, and we should continue to do it. Ariel Bissett is right. The only way to be free of this is to opt out of it. There's no other way. You can't swim upstream and say, well, if I'm bitten by the relevance bug, then I'll just have to give into it and try real hard to be relevant. If I'm bitten by the competition bug, I'll have to just give into it and try real hard to be competitive. It doesn't work that way. First of all, relevance is a myth. It's a mirage. And second, there are always going to be people out there that I admit, I don't know anybody myself who reads more than I do. But I know a whole lot of people who read better than I do. And I could, if I wanted to, I suppose, batten down the hatches and really try to compete with them on that. But it would take the joy out of reading. It's exactly the sort of thing that does. Instead, when you have a channel and you're reading, I don't know, old pulp paperbacks, crappy contemporary author, Cormac McCarthy, if you're chapter by chapter, you're reading your way through a Harry Potter novel, I'm not watching because of the material. I'm watching because of you. I'm watching and loving it because of you. That's exactly how it should be. In an ideal world, that's how it would be in the larger conversation as well. I know that books trend on Goodreads. I know that there are new titles that everybody feels like they have to weigh in on. But if it's not genuine, then it's not going to be any good when you do it. It's heartfelt, and we all know when it is, right? When a new science fiction or fantasy book comes down the pike and it's really big, the thing that will determine Whether or not you want to hear someone's opinion will be them, not the book. You'll want to tune in to SFF 180 and see what Thomas thinks of that book. Not because you expect relevance on his channel, but because he makes his thoughts relevant. Same thing with book by book, channel by channel, interest by interest. And that's the way it should be. So that's my admittedly rambling response. That my only defense of how rambling this video is that Ariel Dusset's video was just a trifle more rambling. And I'm not going to have a great thumbnail. but I'm going to wrap it up for now with just that, with a kind of plea, in a way, or at least a recommendation, which is that we all just keep doing this right. We should be our first line of defense against the infection of reading as a competition. We should be each other's first line of defense against that. We're a community here where I want to know what Francina Simone thinks about something. I want to know what Ben Sanders thinks about something. I don't want to know what they think about X, and I'm not interested in the rest of it. I want to know what they think about what they're reading, and that's the community that we're building here, where you subscribe to somebody not for the latest news, but for themselves. That's just as it should be. So I'm going to wrap it up here with that. I'm going to say, yes, public reading is tricky, and yes, it opens the door to competitive reading, but we have the solution right here. We are the solution, and we should take advantage of that. I'm going to go, and I'll be back soon to talk about books. Thank you, BookTube.